This is an IWP media production, brought to you by the Institute of World Politics, the independent accredited graduate school empowering the next generation of national security, intelligence, and international affairs experts. Learn from top scholar practitioners and acquire invaluable skills to propel your career. For more information, visit iwp.edu. The following video contains sensitive language and material that may not be suitable for all audiences. Viewer discretion is advised.
Welcome back to the IWP Podcast. I'm Jim Robbins, Dean of Academics at the Institute of World Politics, the independent graduate school of national security, intelligence, and international affairs located in Washington, D.C. Joining us today is Mitzi Perdue, a seasoned war correspondent specializing in reporting on Russian war crimes, including child abduction, landmine deployments, and cyber warfare. Since Russia invaded Ukraine, Mitzi has worked tirelessly to chronicle the war, publishing in outlets including The Wall Street Journal, USA Today, and the Epoch Times, among others. Recently, in collaboration with American University Kyiv, Mitzi founded Mental Health Global, a nonprofit dedicated to providing free AI-driven mental health care for the estimated 15 million Ukrainians suffering from debilitating mental health challenges caused by the war. Mitzi is also a longtime friend of IWP. So, Mitzi, thank you for making time to come on the IWP podcast.
I'm absolutely overjoyed to be doing it. I love IWP since 1994.
Almost from the beginning.
Pretty much.
1994.
At least from the beginning of the building.
Right. Fantastic. So, jumping right into it, how did you get involved in Ukraine war reporting?
Total life-changing fluke. But I write for Psychology Today. I write pretty regularly for them. And I had written a story in July of 2022, the year that the full-scale invasion began. And in this story, I wrote about human traffickers who love conflict areas because there are all sorts of people who are just at loose ends and are vulnerable. So I wrote about that, what was going on in Ukraine. And I had a huge piece of, from my point of view, good luck. The chief of police for the Kyiv region had written his master's thesis on human trafficking. So my story ended up in his desk, and he invited me in a Zoom in which he said, if you'll come to Ukraine, you can be a guest of the Kyiv region police for a week. Whew, as a journalist, does it get any better?
Absolutely. How often do you get to Ukraine?
I've been 4 times, and there's a 5th that's in the works.
Oh, super. Now, you have highlighted the problems of human trafficking as a result of this war, which often happens outside of the active war zone, something people may not realize. Explain how that happens.
Okay, one of the ways that I've personally witnessed is, say, let's just imagine something really pretty improbable, but zap, you're a woman. It's 2025, you can declare, but
Who knows?
okay, but in your imagination, you're a woman. Your husband is up at the front. Your village is bombed to smithereens. You've lost all your possessions. You can't live in that village anymore. So you go to the border to cross over into Poland, but you don't know the language. You don't know where your next meal is coming. You're depressed. You're just out of it. And then you cross over the border, and there's this kindly elderly man who says, you look as if you could use a hot meal, and I can help you find a job. Come with me, but the van leaves in 5 minutes. You do it. But that guy is a trafficker, and you're probably going to become the equivalent of a sex slave until you die 5 or 6 years later. And your chances of being rescued are 1 in 100. That's the kind of vulnerability that the traffickers just feed on.
And you've said that it's extremely systematic. This isn't just like ad hoc, and they have teams of people who work the kind of refugee flow to find the vulnerable people.
I'll give you an example. Say you're that imaginary woman who could very well be, I mean, it's based on real cases. You've been waiting in line 4 or 5 hours on the Ukrainian side to cross over, and you happen to notice that there's some guys taking selfies. They're not taking selfies. If you look carefully at the angle of their cell phone, it's taking a photograph of you, because the spotters, and that's what they're called, these men on the Ukrainian side, they're looking for the most vulnerable women so that the guys on the other side, when there are refugees streaming past them, the traffickers aren't going to waste their time with somebody who's kind of strong and resilient. Nah, you're going to pick the most vulnerable, but you don't even have to pick that yourself because the spotter's already done it. So you don't waste any time, and you just move in and in your kindly way offer to help.
Right. And these people are essentially sold into slavery. I mean, that's how they make money off this, right? They're just selling these people.
Yeah, and when I started writing about human trafficking, I guess it was about 6 years ago, human trafficking was the third biggest source of revenue for international crime. Ahead of it was drugs and arms sales. Today, it's moved to the head of the line. It is the biggest source of income for criminals.
Really, more than drugs.
More than drugs. And there's a very good reason that I think anybody would get. I sell you a pound of heroin. Heaven knows what it cost. But once it's used up, it's gone. I sell you a girl. You can use her over and over again until she commits suicide or dies, which will typically, the average life of a trafficked woman, she's not likely to live longer than 7 years because suicide or disease or murder will take her. Or she's just not attractive anymore and you can't sell her, so you kill her for her organs.
Oh my God, that's horrible.
Yeah, it gets about as black and dark and evil as it gets. Although I think there's one thing more evil. It has to do with child abductions. You would think you have a child, man or woman, it's your child, and that child, maybe the child is 6 years old, and it gets abducted by the Russians, taken from you, and now it's in Russia, and you can't get the child back because they've done everything they can to destroy the records, the passport, the name, the birthday. I mean, it's somewhere in eastern Russia, maybe it's Siberia or somewhere. That child is gone, never to be seen again. Oh, that it were so, that it was never to be seen again. No, there's one thing worse than having your kids stolen. And I've talked with people that what I'm about to describe, it's happened to them. Sigh. There's one thing worse than having your child stolen, because what they do is they, at least in some cases that we know of, these children are sent to special military camps where they are taught that Ukraine is just the most terrible place on earth. That they kill young children, that your parents gave you up because they hated you, and they're just taught to hate Ukraine, but you're also taught military skills, and then you come back as a soldier to kill Ukrainians. And a woman who told me about this, it happened to her son, she said, you expect your kids to protect you in your old age, not to come try and kill you. Is there anything worse than that?
Horrendous. Well, a time-honored practice, because in the Bolshevik era, Felix Dzerzhinsky, the founder of the Cheka, the secret police, would go to orphanages and just grab orphans, and then they would become the future secret policemen. They would just train and indoctrinate them from a very young age to be completely loyal to the party and to the state and to the secret police.
So they have a playbook that they follow.
Oh, for sure. Yes, you can go. Yeah, long-standing Russian playbook. Yes.
Wow.
Well, another thing. Speaking of children, you mentioned the use of landmines and how they systematically target children with landmines.
I have seen playgrounds, and this was a couple of years ago, so I hope it's not true today. But when I was in Russia and when I was in Ukraine the first time, I saw some of the world's most beautiful playgrounds, just so appealing. I'm a grandmother, and oh, I would have loved to have my kids play in those just bright, colorful, swings and slides and playhouses. They're all empty. And I asked the Russian policewoman who was accompanying me, her name's Irina, I said, "Where are the kids?" And she said, "Because the Russians go out of their way to plant landmines in the playgrounds, and they have them cleverly disguised so that, like, I've seen ones that just a few pine needles over them, you'd never know it's there. And a child steps on one, and it has 40 milligrams of an explosive that's just enough to take off the kid's foot, but not kill him." And
Right.
I was told, but I've had this confirmed from numerous sources, that they don't want to kill the child. They want the child maimed. So one parent has to stay home with the child. And that means, one more person who can't contribute to the economy, one more person who isn't going to be like becoming a soldier. The parents, at least one parent is home caring for that badly lifetime injured child. I just, who could even think of doing this? I've
Yes.
seen the landmines, by the way. They're the ones that are particularly targeting children.
Yeah.
Hold up your palm for a minute, and then just take the palm part of your hand. They're that size. They're
Right.
small and just inconspicuous. I don't think you'd see it unless you were really looking for it.
Yeah. Small plastic
Plastic,
mines. They could be mistaken for a little toy or something.
well, you might not even see it because, say, in the summer it's going to be green. It will look like the grasses that are growing around. Or in the fall, they have multicolored, like brown and orange ones. And then some of them are just sort of sand colored. I mean, they're absolutely designed to be camouflaged so that unless you're looking for it, you're running to catch a ball or something. You step on one, there goes your foot.
Hmm. Yeah. And again, speaking of the playbook, I mean, they had the same thing in Afghanistan for the same purpose, where they would air deploy these butterfly mines that would flutter down, and then children would go see what it was and, blow their foot off, blow their hand off.
Yeah, what's the mentality of somebody who could do this? Because I would make a guess, and I'm not being knowledgeable to this, but this is my best guess. I think a typical American couldn't do that unless they've had a lot of indoctrination that I can't fathom.
Yeah, I don't think there's ever
Unless you're a
been
psychopath.
anything like that in our military kit of, hey, we're going to target children with a toy bomb.
The soldiers and military people that I know, they do anything to protect a child, risk their own life.
Yeah. It's definitely a different mentality.
In my just everyday life, I can't help but talk about things that I've seen in Ukraine. And I come across the fact that there are a lot of Americans who can't fathom that much evil exists. It's so foreign to them. They think, oh, but we're all part of the brotherhood of man. We're all deep down alike. I don't think we are.
Well, it's a complex question of good and evil,
Let's solve it right now, please.
Yeah, right. Oh, on our podcast, we'll give you the answer. Stay tuned for the answer. Extremely complicated question when you look at all the atrocities that have taken place, through the 20th century. Certainly not a great century in that respect. It's hard to figure, and certainly philosophers have tussled with this for forever.
Well, I sure as heck tussle with it because it's mind-boggling. One of the things that I do as a journalist, particularly as a journalist who is, every time I've been there, I've been a guest of the police. And it's the police who investigate war crimes. And so, this happens a lot. I'm in a police station, and people in the town, this would always be a town that's been liberated, like Irpin or Bucha. The people in the town learn that there's an American journalist who wants to tell their story, so they come. But that means that I've heard just the most depraved stories. Are we up for a mildly depraved one? I won't get explicit, but I think you'll get a picture.
Well, it makes for good podcasting.
Well, here goes. There was one woman who told me that she wasn't just gang raped, but they held her husband so that he couldn't move but had to watch as she's being violated. And then they let her go. They let him go. But the people who did this understand the Ukrainian culture enough that in the Ukrainian culture, I'm told that this is very, very strong in Ukraine. It's probably true throughout the world, but that it's a big thing in Ukraine that the man's role is to protect the wife. And so he didn't protect his wife, and he feels terrible because he didn't. I mean, it's just, I know of one case where the man who had this happen committed suicide. But the man is devastated because he didn't fulfill his cultural role. And the woman is devastated because it happened to her, and also that her husband didn't fulfill his cultural role. So that marriage is, how about, destroyed, and it plays out with the kids because the kids, get the stress from parents who are just mortally emotionally wounded. I mean, the cruelty of that, just the utter deliberateness of it. They know what they're doing and they do it.
It's terrible. Your reporting has also exposed the way that Russian propagandists use troll farms and other methods to insert their narratives into the media stream, some of which penetrate the free media in the West, some of which become talking points for politicians, and, some of which you see on the nightly news. But it all starts with them. So how does that work?
Okay, I don't want to get political because as a journalist, I try very hard not to be Republican or Democrat. So I will handle it the following way. I will tell you without mentioning the person's name, but there is, let's say it's a congressperson. There's a congressperson who is spouting things against Ukraine that I heard about even before she ever mentioned them, but it's the following. I have a friend in the Ukrainian police who monitors cyber attacks by troll farms. So he knows what's coming out of St. Petersburg. And it will be things like Zelensky is anti-Christian, he's persecuting Christians, he's closing the churches. That's one. I'm going to name several. That Ukraine is the most corrupt country in the world. You donate anything to it, it's going straight to an oligarch's pocket. See if I can think of some of the others that, that it's a never-ending war, that America is going to be just like it was in Afghanistan, and, well, hosts of others. So this guy the policeman in Ukraine is telling me this is like the current crop of disinformation that's coming out of St. Petersburg. But then there is a congressperson who is saying exactly what the people in the Kremlin want her to say. And that's not because she's a bad person, but because somehow her sources have been corrupted.
Right.
And by the way, I know firsthand that the part about that Zelensky's persecuting Christians is wrong. And here's what's really going on. Zelensky did close some churches, but in Ukraine, a certain proportion of the churches in the country, I'm not sure of these figures, but I'll be directionally accurate, even if I'm not exactly accurate. Supposing there are 10,000 churches in Ukraine, something like 4,000 of them are Russian Orthodox, as in they're controlled from Russia. And they tend to be staffed by people that the FSB, the secret police, approves of. And they're like spy stations, and they're telling their congregation, don't support you. I mean, they're just, it's like a fifth column. They're there to destroy Ukraine, not help. So Zelensky closed those. On the other hand, and again, I'm using figures that are sort of made up, but they're directionally accurate. The 6,000 that are regular, honest churches, they're thriving. And I know this is true because I've loved visiting churches in Ukraine. They're beautiful. And also it's inspirational to see like the comfort and the solace that you can read on the faces of the crowds that are there. So there's no possibility that Zelensky's closed all the churches. I'm living proof that he hasn't and didn't. But
Right.
there's a woman that I know fairly well. She might even be listening to this, so I'll make up her name. We will call her Susan Smith. Ooh, that's awful close to her name. But anyway, uh, Susan absolutely believes the Russian propaganda that Zelensky's closing the churches and hates Christians. And there's no way you can dislodge that from it. But you ask her, where'd you get the information? Well, as a born-again Christian, there are sites on, like, I don't know, Facebook, other social media, the 21 largest that that born-agains go to. I have read from a person speaking from, I believe he has an official position at MIT, possibly a professor or researcher. Okay, so I don't know how much we can. I think again it's going to be directionally true. I can't swear if it's the figures are exactly right, but this is what I read. Of the 21 largest sites that born agains go to, 21 of them are just heavily influenced out of St. Petersburg.
Hmm.
They're giving the St. Petersburg version of things.
And probably unwittingly. It's
Well,
not like that, they're going, well, according to the Russian press, here's what's going on. I mean, it could be filtered through different things. Or, as he said, I mean, there are thousands of these bot farms that are pushing this stuff
okay,
out.
my source says, no, they're actually Russian people pretending to be Americans. These are people who might have a PhD in psychology and they know our history back and forth, and they've studied the fissures in our society, and they know the arguments that are really going to land with a born-again Christian. Oh, I mean, at least some of them really know what they're doing. And then here's another thing. Often, according to my source, at this point, I'm quoting the Ukrainian policeman. Often the people, say, who are on a Facebook group that's directed at born-agains, often they've been there 20, no, I'm speaking, 10 or more years. And, they've created a whole identity for themselves. They'll, you go look to see, well, who is this person who said this interesting thing? And, well, he's followed by 10,000 people on LinkedIn. They'll create a whole identity. And then on top of that, other trolls, Russian trolls, will go authenticate what he's saying. So there's a whole ecology that was going to make you believe what he's saying. In other words, these guys are really smart, and I wish we were more effective at counterbalancing them.
Oh, if only.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if
I mean,
only.
they are so good at it. When you look at, if you go back to the 60s and 70s and look at the themes of communist propaganda and the narratives that they were pushing then, which today are part of our normal political discourse,
Oh, Lord.
but which had their roots in what was coming out of Moscow, what was coming out of Beijing, particularly during the Vietnam War, about, how terrible our society is and all this other stuff. It was commonplace for them to like push it on our media, which resisted it then, but now has embraced it. And it's almost the normal narrative today is what the communists were pushing 50 years ago.
Well, I have one possible antidote to it. Oh, there's a YouTube put on by former Senator Gordon Humphrey. And he's somebody who speaks, he's from, I guess he's New Hampshire. And I think he's been retired a decade or possibly two. But his view is that when we disbanded Voice of America, which I think we did 20 years ago, however long ago, we did disband it with the understanding that we were going to have something newer and better and more powerful, and it got around to it. And his view is that we're just completely undefended against this.
Yes.
And he would love to see us, he would love to see a movement of quick, put something back in place, because right now, I'm making this up as I go along, but imagine there's a football game and one side shows up and the goal is to get the ball to the other end and the other doesn't show up. And I kind of think that's my impression of where we are. Our side just hasn't shown up. They're going to get the ball to the goalpost unopposed.
Well, that's a very good perspective. I'm a little informed on this
Oh, please
because
tell me.
I was just on the presidential transition team for the U.S. Agency for Global Media,
Yes?
which is our current umbrella for our public diplomacy mission. Brent Bazell was just named yesterday. Yes, to be the new CEO for that. Carrie Lake, of course, was
Oh my.
suggested by the president to be the Voice of America head. And yes, it was, VOA wasn't done away with, but there was a reorganization in the
Okay.
1990s.
Okay, this guy didn't say Voice of America wasn't
Well,
there USIA or USIS
the
or
it was USIA, U.S.
okay.
Information Agency, which was then changed into something else that now evolved into USAGM, which is the umbrella over these other agencies. Not to get too much into the weeds, but the major point is, yes, they moved away from their Cold War mission of being a tool of U.S. strategy to promote narratives that were favorable to tell America's story and to give news and information to totalitarian societies where they can't get it from their government because the government is censoring it. So we could penetrate the great firewall of China and so and to get to the people. But in the 1990s, after the Cold War, everybody said, oh, we don't need that anymore because history has ended and everything's, information will flow freely and all those kind of things that people idealistically believed 30 years ago or so that we know now are not true. And so it will be the mission of the new team under the Trump administration to go in and reorient our public diplomacy against these foreign narratives that are undermining our society, but also to help bring the truth to their societies. So
Actually, I'm
hopefully,
beyond thrilled to hear this because Senator Humphrey, to my mind, makes such a case that we aren't defending ourselves.
right.
But it looks like in the current administration, we're going to start.
Well, I hope so. That's what our team suggested, and hopefully, we think that that's the direction that the White House wants to go. Certainly, based on statements from the president, that's what they want to do, and we just echoed that in our action plan for USAGM. So, just I wasn't planning on talking about that, but that's what the team I just got off of. So
Well, if
there it
anybody's
is.
listening to us on radio, I have a grin that's close to ear hearing this. What good news.
Well, we do need to hit back because the adversary countries are so effective at promoting these messages. And Ukraine is just a case study. If you look at it globally, like, coming from China, coming from Iran, stuff that's pumped out from North Korea, even their disinformation campaigns, any of these countries, because it's a cheap and effective way for them to play on a level playing field with us because, as you say, our team isn't really showing up. We're hoping that will change.
I
But
love hearing
yes,
that.
we will see. But moving on to another more serious point, your reporting got you on a Russian kill list. Is that right?
Yes.
Well, tell that story.
Uh, After I'd been there 3 times, I did something that got a lot of attention, which is I had auctioned a ring that Frank Perdue left me. And Frank Perdue was the most philanthropic person I ever met, so I knew he'd approve of this. I auctioned a, the one of the larger perfect emeralds, and it came from the St. Serpent treasure ship Atocha, sunk in 1622. So it was old, it was historic, and it was large, and it was flawless. It sold for $1.2 million. Yay. All of which is I have given to Ukraine. And in one of the uses for it, there were 5 police boats that had been confiscated. And this is terrible for Ukraine because Ukraine, there's an awful lot of rivers in Ukraine, and a lot of crime happens on rivers, like smuggling, human trafficking, arms movements. It's just, you really want a police presence to kind of put a lid on some of this, but all the police boats are gone. That means that the bad stuff is just unfettered. Well, some of the money that I got from the sale of the Etoch emerald, I used to replace the 5 missing speedboats. And because it was my money, I got to name them. And they were expecting me maybe to name it after my 2 sons or my late husband or after James Robbins, just somebody good. But in fact, I asked if they could find me the names of 5 foreign fighters who had come from different countries and would name the boats after them. Well, they gave me the names of somebody from Japan, Australia, Netherlands, France, the United States. So they were named after 5 foreign fighters. But because I'm a journalist and it's my nature to do this, I interviewed the parents of each of the fallen heroes. And it's just so moving to hear like a father from Japan tell about how his son heard Zelensky's call to defend freedom and how freedom was more important to his son than life itself. And each of the parents had some really stirring story to tell about how they had raised a son so idealistic that he would give his life for people from another country. Well, the tribute books, they're each about, 4 pages long. And I made sure that they got sent to the country where, like, the Japanese hero went to all the newspapers in Japan. Sure. And so it really got global publicity at the launching of the ships. And I'm making a guess now, but pretty close, I think. I think there were at least 50 members of the foreign press at the ceremony for the launching of the 5 boats. So it just got immense publicity. And that put me, I'm told, on the Kremlin's murder list. Because, this is something that was kind of, from my point of view, designed, well, first to celebrate heroes, but second, I wanted to tug at the heartstrings of people. And I'm told that it did. So now to jump ahead,
But how did you find out
that I was on the murder
that you were
list?
on the murder list?
I had 3 different people tell me, one of whom, by the way, is from IWP.
Mm-hmm.
He told me not to go. Then another friend who's retired CIA, and then the third one will always be mysterious to me. But I once, actually that year, had given a talk in Shenzhen, China. And I had, before COVID, I'd given a talk in Shenzhen, and I'd given my card to a Chinese guy who, how he would know this, I have no idea, but he wasn't connected to the other 2 who told me about it. He called me, I think it was from China, it might have been Hong Kong. I hadn't heard from him, so it's just amazing to hear from this guy. He is Chinese, and he said, and he wouldn't go into detail, but he said, you need to know that you're on Russia's murder list. And then he wouldn't say anything more, and the conversation ended. But, that gets a girl's attention.
Right.
But on the other hand, I didn't believe that, my calculation was that Putin probably has 500,000 people that he's mad at, and I'm probably pretty low on the list. And I'm still ready to believe that I'm low on the list, but I've since learned that you don't go after the people in order of how mad you are. You go after targets of opportunity.
Right.
And that if ever I was alone and without a bodyguard or something, that would make me an attractive target.
Mm-hmm. So then what happened?
Well, nothing happened in Ukraine the next time I went by, but the Ukrainian police took it seriously enough without my telling them even. They had, at every moment, they had 4 special forces people with me, and if I went from one town to another, it would be in a police convoy, so as safe as could be. But then I was in Warsaw right after that, and I entered a Warsaw hotel, actually the airport Marriott, and I've checked in, I've got my room key, and I'm heading towards the elevator, and I see a man and a woman, tall guy, long blonde-haired woman, and some, inner voice, which I don't really believe in, except it was so strong that I acted on it. It said, don't get on the elevator with them. I mean, it's the spidey sense, the Spider-Man sense.
Yes.
Well, I've experienced it, and it's real. I took it seriously. I looked at my watch, pretended I'd forgotten something, and walked away. I came back half an hour later. They're gone. Yay. I got on the elevator. And then on the second floor, they get on. And what I'm about to describe, I don't remember it, but it's happened to almost 100 other journalists. There's a group called Bellingcat that checks on journalists who are attacked. And the MO is say the tall guy bumps into you real hard so that you're almost tipping over. And the woman then injects you with, I'm not sure what, but I guess it's Novichok. And for months afterwards, I had the little injection mark in my thigh. I get to my room and I have trouble breathing. And there was a point where it was really clear to me that I was in serious trouble and that I should do something about this, but I didn't even have the energy to roll over in the bed to ask for the house phone. But, this is an IWP story. Without IWP, I don't think I'd be here. I texted Marek
Hodakevich,
Hodakevich.
one of our professors.
Yeah, but since he's Polish and since I really like him, I texted him, help, room 409, airport Marriott, can't breathe. And he, I've heard that there's several people in the U.S. who took it really seriously that I had this problem. And they called the front desk, and then the clerk at the front desk saw out the plate glass window that the airport ambulance was there. So he went running out to the EMTs, and they came to my room, and they didn't speak or anything. They just leapt across the room and smashed an oxygen mask over my face, and it felt like a python was constricting my chest. I couldn't take a deep breath, and I was the wheezing like you can't imagine. And they injected me twice, which what I think was the antidote for anaphylactic shock, epinephrine, had no effect. And I'm going downhill rapidly. I mean, the room's going black. It's really not good. And then they tried a third thing, and I believe it was atropine, but I don't speak Polish, and there wasn't anybody I could ask. They don't speak English. But I do know from many other sources that the Russian drug cartels and the Polish drug cartels are trying to bump each other off. I mean, turf war. So that means that most of the EMTs in Warsaw have atropine in their medical case. And so they tried something else, and it worked really, really fast. And, time dilates, so I can't tell you whether it's 30 seconds or 10 minutes, but pretty soon I could take a deep breath again, and the wheezing stopped. But I was still sick for the next 5 days, too sick to travel home. Finally I did get home, and, with x-rays it showed that one of my lungs wasn't functioning right. I had such severe inflammation of my gums that a dentist said, you are going to lose all your teeth. I had heart issues. I mean, I was a mess. But then, again, by huge good fortune from my point of view, the inflammation went down. I kept all but one of my teeth. The lung on its own reinflated, and I'm pretty good today.
Incredible. Yeah, Novichok is a nerve agent that the Russians developed. It's what they used to bump people off. They used it on Alexei Navalny, the dissident politician, trying to kill him, failing in that. They succeeded later. But I don't know if it's an honor to be
I'm
on Putin's list like that, like they actually tried it. But
Well, I will
it's
tell
a
you.
testament to your reporting.
Well, I figure, I will never have a bigger status symbol in my life. And then there's one other part. People say, do you have PTSD about this? Are you all nervous? No, my biggest reaction is, if you really want your 4 grandchildren, ages like 9 to 16, if you really want your grandchildren to think that you're a badass grandma, be an assassination attempt survivor.
Right. Well, being the target of a Russian hit squad, I mean, that's That just shows how effective you are and how important they think that your reporting
Well,
is.
I think my day-by-day reporting probably irritates them, but I think my guess is that selling the ring and having it go to celebrate foreign heroes. This just got total global publicity. I mean, I've met so many people who heard about it that I meet people at parties or even in Ukraine. Uh, I I could be in a restaurant or a warming tent or just anywhere, and people would come up to me and recognize me. So it did get a lot of attention.
Absolutely incredible. Uh, Tell me about Mental Health Global
Oh, that's what
and
I most
what
want to
you're
talk
doing with
about.
that. Yeah, please do.
Uh, well, one of the things, since my specialty is interviewing war crimes victims, and I do have lost count, but I think it's 258 stories that have been published since the war, since the full-scale invasion. One of the things, there was a common thread that I kept coming across, which is if you've been tortured, raped, or just the infinite horrible things that they do to you, you had some mental issues. I mean, maybe you've got insomnia, maybe you've got panic attacks, maybe you've got depression. You're very likely to have uncontrollable rage, or disassociation. I mean, there's just I am not a trained psychologist, but I do write for Psychology Today, which means that I hang out with psychologists and read this stuff so that uh, I know enough to have an opinion. And but I also it's backed up by the WHO that said like a year ago that 15 million people in Ukraine right now have mental health issues, again, like insomnia or just a whole panoply of problems. And yeah, what are the chances of one person getting one-on-one mental health support the way you might do here in the USA? And I think the answer is awful close to zero because there's so many and there's so few therapists. So is there some other way of providing help? And as somebody who absolutely loves ChatGPT, and I wrote my master's thesis on the future of computers, so I have a lifelong interest in what computers can do, I started wondering, might there be, yeah, for anybody who's used ChatGPT, and even if you haven't, you'll discover that it's almost like talking with a person. They can be sympathetic, they can be kindly, uh, but a defect of ChatGPT, if you're saying, I'm depressed, what do I do? A defect is they may give an unhelpful answer. I mean, they probably get it right, but it's not guaranteed.
Yeah.
Uh, so how would you get around that if you were going to have ChatGPT as a way of helping people who, you've always rather that they had help right off with a real person, but that's just not in the cards. And some can't afford it. So what I have in mind is free, and it would be available 24/7. And here's how it would work. And by the way, it is, uh, as we speak, they're beginning piloting what I'm about to describe. Oh, and I should say who they is. The American University in Kyiv has taken this on as a project. The rector of the whole university likes the idea of using artificial intelligence to help. And the way they have gone about it is General Petraeus has raised at least $500,000, maybe 600,000 by now, to help fund people at the American University Kyiv, particularly Ukrainian psychologists, psychiatrists, to train a ChatGPT kind of agent only exclusively on material that's appropriate for Ukrainians and that they find sound. So ChatGPT could give you a wrong answer. I think if all the answers are like approved by sources that Ukrainians approve, that you're going to get something pretty good. But we'll pilot it, and the piloting it may be happening right now because I talked yesterday with people who are in on it. It starts very small with like 8 people, but it's supervised. Every question, every answer is supervised by trained psychotherapists to make sure that they're on the right track. Then it's going to grow to from 8, 20, then maybe thousands. And again, something that this is not signed, sealed, and delivered, but it's being actively discussed. The Ukrainian police, as with police all over the world, there's a lot of PTSD. I mean, they see things that are hard.
No.
And the Kyiv region police, there's 6,400 of them, and there are people at the Kyiv region police that I'm actively in discussion with them of, would they like to be part of piloting this? And again, it's not signed, sealed, and delivered, but there's sure a lot of interest in it. Because imagine you're suffering, and there's something that can give you some relief. It's not going to cure you, but it will. One of the things that I've observed in the pilots that I've already seen, very small-scale pilots, but somebody who's having a panic attack, when they realize that there are people who care, when they realize that they're not alone in this weird, strange thing that's happening, and then there's some things that you can do. And like, I know of 3 things that would help a panic attack victim because I've seen what the internet response is to it. It could do a lot of good. And then imagine, with a lot of fine tuning, a lot of, we're going to learn as we go along that, don't do that. It's triggering to somebody, or don't do that. It's like we have filters to make sure that if somebody's suicidal, it's going to flag it immediately and kick that incident into someplace where a real person can give immediate care. But imagine that we learn how to do it right. And I know that's going to take a lot of learning, but imagine if it could help a whole country. And then I had the huge privilege of talking with the just retired head of the United Nations General Assembly president. And he said that this could be global. And he said that it could be very nice for the United Nations because this is something that would appeal to every country. So it's not controversial, and it's so scalable, and it can be done in any country because in pretty much every country you'll have an institution of higher learning, and they can do whatever they need to do to make it appropriate for their culture.
Sure. Yeah, veterans, first responders. I mean, there are people all over the world who could benefit from this.
I mean, I even know of police in this country who want to explore it further. And then since I want this thing to grow hugely, and I have some experience having sold my ring for $1.2 million, I also own 12 dinner plates that belonged to Tsar Alexander II from, I guess they're like close to, I have to do math in my head, at least 220 years old. They were given to him by his father. They're historic as all get out, and there are only 14 in the world. 2 are in the Hermitage Museum. I think it's Hermitage, but it's one of the Russian museums. And 12 are mine. And I'm going to put these up for auction. It will be in October. And now we come to something relevant to IWP, which is the goal is to have possibly 4 or 5 other items. This would be an auction that will be seen throughout the world and publicized throughout the world. So it ought to raise some significant money. If there's an IWP supporter who has, for example, a really expensive old master, or I don't care, some kind of painting that's worth $1 million or more that has a story to it, if they will donate it to IWP, you put it in the auction, you get 80% of whatever it sells for. And, well, as a matter of fact, I just made a promise today that if it's IWP, you can get 90%. I want something to help support. I want a great big chunk to support Mental Health Global. But this is a way for people to convert and get tax deductions for property that will benefit the cause that they care about. So if we have an audience, somebody has some amazing jewelry or paintings, or I was talking to this one person who's even thinking of, he's elderly and he has no heirs and he has a hotel. And he wanted to know if I'd accept a hotel. Yeah, I'd accept a hotel.
Why
Anybody
not?
else got a hotel?
Sure, if you have a hotel or land.
No,
An old Rembrandt, it could be anything.
no, we would like an old Rembrandt. No, but we really want it to be, because part of the effort of this is raising money, but it's also raising awareness. When there's this huge auction of an immensely valuable item, the world press is going to talk about it.
Sure.
So if IWP wants loads and loads and loads of publicity, which in the end will lead to more donations, anybody who's listening who loves IWP, get in touch with me, please.
Fantastic suggestion. Yes. Hotels, Rembrandts, historic jewelry, whatever you have. anything you want.
A villa in Spain might be nice.
Sure. Anything like that. That'd be great.
How about your private jet?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I'm going to go check my attic and see what I have.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. I'll follow up.
It is ironic in the extreme that China from the Tsar will be sold to support the people of Ukraine. That, that'll get you on Putin's list again.
Oh, boy. I'm told, I hope this is right, that he tends to not assassinate people in the United States because that would tick off Uncle Sam. So I feel safe here, but who knows?
Who the heck knows? It has happened before. I know we're running short on time, but when we look at the future in Ukraine, U.S.-Ukraine policy, I mean, we have a new administration coming in. There's a lot of opportunity now for diplomacy, for some kind of breakthrough. What do you think is going to happen?
Well, I'll tell you what I wish, and it's based on conversations in Ukraine. I've talked with people like journalists in Ukraine, or economists, or people who own factories. They would like to see economic pressures of the following sort. Russia, I think that anything below $60 a barrel, if Russia's making that or less, they're going to go bankrupt fast.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So what if we could, I'm all for drill, baby, drill.
Absolutely.
Flood the market with oil and be real nice to the Saudis. I don't know what we could promise them, but I promise, flood the market and starve him.
Yes.
I wish somebody would tell Mr. Trump the Mitzi idea.
Oh, I think he knows that idea. Yes, energy dominance is a big part of what's coming. And
what about all these people who think it's just, freeze and he's giving away everything? Do you think that's true, or is he more subtle than that?
That who's giving away everything?
Trump.
Giving away what?
Where he's saying just freeze it and you keep the land, Mr. Putin, you keep the land.
Oh, the negotiations. Yeah, I don't think so.
Please tell me that he's more subtle than that.
I'm sure that he is, but what's been in the press is that there will probably be some kind of offer to negotiate. That doesn't mean like giving everything away, but just to establish a process. And if Russia isn't interested in that, then it's going to go the other way, that the U.S. would just ramp it up. That's only what I've seen in the papers, though. I don't know if that's true.
Okay, what I just described, it's just what I was listening to when I was in Ukraine in September.
Well, we'll have to see, but it's an interesting question of whether there can be a diplomatic solution that would not allow Russia to get away with it.
Actually, I take it. All right, this is from Dennis Francis, former president of the UN General Assembly. His view is there's got to be big, terrible consequences like reparations and war crimes, because otherwise, if you just accede to what's to stop? His view is we need deterrence, and it's not deterrence just to have a nice negotiated settlement.
Well, right, not that leaves them with what they took, because that's rewarding aggression. And I think if it stopped today and Russia just kept what it has that it took, that fit everybody's definition of a Russian victory. That before the war, they'd say that's what Russia wanted. Well, what Russia's currently holding is what people said they wanted. So that would be the same as a Russian victory.
That's how I look at it.
Yeah, that's not much of a negotiation if that's what happens.
I just hope that Mr. Trump, or President Trump, has some people advising him who aren't in the category of saying, supporting Ukraine, it's a failed state, don't bother.
Oh, well, I don't think so. In fact, one of our professors, Glenn Korn, who has experience in that region, has a very good pitch that he makes when he was involved in these issues, that President Trump actually was tougher on Russia than Biden. It was Trump that provided the lethal weapons to Ukraine that stopped the invasion, stopped them from overrunning Kyiv. It wasn't Biden, but the Biden administration actually halted the export of those lethal weapons. It was the Trump administration that supplied them and allowed them to defend themselves. There were more persona non gratas of Russian officials under Trump than any other president. Some of their consulates were closed under Trump. And when Russian troops attacked one of our outposts, mercenaries, they called them, in Syria, it was Trump that gave the order to, just defend our troops. And those 300 Russians didn't go home. So Trump actually has a much stronger record against Russia than people give him credit for.
Well, you lighten my soul considerably with that information. Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, Mitzi, I think that we're coming to the end of our time. I want to thank you. Our guest, again, was war reporter Mitzi Perdue for joining us today and telling us about your incredible experiences covering that war, your life-threatening experiences in covering that war and being an activist for the Ukrainian people. So thank you very much for that.
Okay, and as somebody who's a supporter of IWP since 1994, I'm overjoyed and flattered and humbled to be a guest on your show.
Oh, we are thrilled to have you. Well, thanks for listening. For IWP, I'm Jim Robbins. Join us next time for another edition of the IWP Podcast.
If you like our podcast and would like to hear more, please subscribe. And if you are interested in learning more about the topics we covered here today and want to be a student at IWP, go to iwp.edu and click Apply Now.